Here is why you are stronger than you think. Imagine how you would feel if you were not stronger, and everyone tried to suppress your voice. But how would you feel if I told you that you are stronger than you think? Stay with me in the video because I am going to break your misconceptions. Take a breath, not a rushed one, not the kind you barely notice, a real breath. Because right now matters more than you think. You didn't end up here randomly. You didn't click this by mistake. Something inside you is awake. Maybe you feel tired, not just physically. Maybe you've been carrying more than you let on. Smiling on the outside, grinding on the inside. You've been strong for so long that you forgot how strong you actually are. You question yourself. You hesitate. You wonder if you've already hit your limit. Let me be clear. You haven't. What you're feeling isn't weakness. It's pressure. And pressure doesn't destroy strong people. It reveals them. You don't need more motivation. You don't need someone to hype you up. You need the truth about who you are, the truth about what you've already survived, the truth about what you're capable of next. Because once you see it, you won't unsee it. And once that happens, everything changes. The lie you were taught from the start, you were handed a narrow definition of strength. Strength looked loud, dominant, unshakable. It looked like never hesitating, never struggling, never slowing down. That image was polished, marketable, easy to admire, but it wasn't complete. Real strength doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't need volume to exist. It doesn't need approval to be real. True strength is often invisible. It's showing up when no one is clapping. It's doing the right thing without recognition. It's holding the line when escape feels tempting. You were taught to believe that if something feels hard, you're doing it wrong. That if doubt shows up, you're not built for the challenge. That if you struggle, you must be weak. That belief quietly shaped your choices. You stopped pushing sooner than you should. You questioned yourself faster than necessary. You underestimated what you could handle. Not because you lacked strength, but because you misunderstood it. You learned to compare yourself to extremes, to highlight reels, to perfect moments. And in comparison, your effort looked small. But strength is not measured in moments. It's measured in consistency. Anyone can look powerful on a good day. Strength shows up on ordinary days. On days when motivation is low, energy is thin, confidence is quiet. Strength is choosing to continue anyway. You were also taught that strength means never needing help. So you learn to carry everything alone, to stay silent, to avoid vulnerability. But real strength knows when to ask. It knows when to pause. It knows when to recover. Endurance is not self-destruction. Pushing without awareness. It is not bravery. Listening to your limits doesn't make you weak. It makes you sustainable. You were taught to believe that rest equals failure, that slowing down means falling behind. But recovery is part of resilience. Even the strongest systems require renewal. Without it, they collapse. Strength isn't about being hard all the time. It's about being adaptable. You bend without breaking. You adjust without quitting. You learn without losing momentum. That's real power. The biggest lie you were taught is that strength rare? It's not. It's common. It's built in moments. No one celebrates. In choices no one sees. In decisions that don't make headlines. And you've been making those choices for longer than you realize. You've been stronger than the story you were told. The problem was never your capacity. The problem was the definition you inherited. And once that definition changes, everything else does too. Why you feel weak even when you're not. Feeling weak doesn't mean you are weak. It means you're human. Your mind and body are wired for protection, not expansion, not risk, not growth. Their job is simple. Keep you safe. Keep things familiar. So when you step into uncertainty, your system reacts. Heart rate rises. Thoughts race. Energy dips. Your mind calls it danger, but it's just a change. Discomfort gets mislabeled as incapability. You feel tension and assume you've reached your limit. You haven't. You've reached resistance. Resistance shows up right before growth. Another reason you feel weak is constant pressure. Modern life doesn't stop. There's noise everywhere. Expectations stack up fast. You're always on, always responding, always adapting. That drains energy. Low energy feels like low strength, but they aren't the same thing. Strength is capacity. Energy is fuel. You can have deep strength with an empty tank. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you need renewal. Comparison also plays a role. You see polished results, finished stories, perfect moments. You don't see the struggle behind them. So you measure your behind-the-scenes effort against someone else's highlight. That creates a false gap. It makes normal effort feel inadequate. Another trap is emotional fatigue. Unresolved stress piles up quietly. Small frustrations, delayed goals, unspoken pressure. Over time, they blur your perspective. You start interpreting tiredness as failure. But tired doesn't mean incapable. It means you've been carrying weight. There's also the issue of timing. You expect strength to show up on demand, right when you need it, right when things get hard. But strength often appears after you act, not before. You don't feel strong and then take action. You take action, and then strength follows. That delay confuses people. They stop too early. Another reason is internal language. The way you talk to yourself shapes how you feel. If your inner voice is harsh, every challenge feels heavier. If your inner voice doubts you, every obstacle feels permanent. That doesn't reflect reality. It reflects conditioning. You are trained to question yourself before trusting yourself. That habit feels like weakness. It's not. It's learned hesitation. And learned habits can be changed. Lastly, fear has good marketing. It sounds logical, protective, reasonable. It offers comfort in exchange for progress. When fear speaks, it uses familiar arguments. Wait, not now. Be careful. Those words feel wise. But they often hide avoidance. Feeling weak is often just fear wearing a reasonable mask. And fear doesn't mean stop. It means pay attention. It means you're near an edge where growth happens. So when you feel weak, pause before judging yourself. Ask a better question. Am I actually incapable? Or am I simply uncomfortable? Because those two things are very different. And understanding that difference changes everything. The hidden proof in your life. You don't need new evidence. You already have it. It's buried in your past, in moments you don't revisit often, in chapters you rush past just to survive. Think back. There were times you didn't know how you would make it. No clear plan. No safety net. Yet somehow, you adapted. You figured things out step by step. You made decisions under pressure. You kept moving without certainty. That wasn't luck. That was capability. You faced situations you never trained for. You handled responsibilities you never asked for. You showed up even when you felt unprepared. And you didn't collapse. You learned. That's proof. Look at the quiet victories, the conversations you didn't want to have, but had anyway. The mornings you got up, when staying in bed felt easier. The times you chose discipline over comfort. No one applauded those moments, but they matter. They built something inside you. You also survived disappointment, plans that didn't work out, expectations that fell apart, an effort that went unnoticed. Those moments tested your patience, and yet you adjusted. You found new paths. New perspectives, new ways forward. That's resilience in action. Even setbacks tell a story. Every time you stumbled, you gathered information. You learned what didn't work. You learned what mattered. You learned what you could endure. Pain became instruction. Not because it was pleasant, but because you paid attention. Another piece of proof. This is how you carry responsibility. You handle obligations daily. Bills, deadlines, commitments. You manage pressure without constant reassurance. That requires strength. You don't think of it that way because it feels normal now. But normal doesn't mean easy. It means familiar. You've also changed. Compare yourself to who you were years ago. You think differently. You react differently. You prioritize differently. Growth happened quietly, without milestones. That doesn't make it smaller. It makes it real. Even the fact that you're listening right now is evidence. People without strength avoid reflection. They avoid growth. They avoid responsibility for change. You did it. You leaned in. You searched for understanding. You chose awareness. That choice matters. Strength leaves fingerprints everywhere. In your decisions, in your endurance, in your willingness to keep evolving. You don't need to imagine who you could be. You need to recognize who you already are. Because the strongest proof isn't something ahead of you. It's behind you. And it's undeniable. You are conditioned to underestimate yourself. You didn't start this way. You weren't born doubting yourself. You weren't born hesitant. You weren't born afraid of trying. That came later. It was learned slowly, quietly, repeatedly. From an early age, you were taught how to fit in. Be realistic. Don't aim too high. Dreams were praised until they got inconvenient. Curiosity was encouraged until it challenged limits. So you adjusted. You learned what was acceptable, what was safe, what wouldn't draw attention. Each time you played small, it felt responsible. But over time, responsibility turned into restriction. You started measuring yourself against expectations instead of potential. You learned to value approval over progress. That shifted your focus. You became careful. Careful with words, careful with goals, careful with ambition. Caution was framed as maturity. But caution, repeated too often, becomes self-doubt. You also absorbed the idea that mistakes define you. So you avoided them. You hesitated. You delayed. You waited for certainty. But certainty never arrived. Perfection became the standard. And perfection is paralyzing. You were conditioned to believe that failure is something to avoid instead of something to learn from. That belief shrinks capacity. It keeps the effort small. Another layer came from comparison. You saw people praised for results, not for effort. You saw confidence rewarded, not courage. So when your progress felt messy, you assumed it was wrong. You didn't see the behind-the-scenes struggle that everyone else hides. That distorted your self-image. You judged your beginning against someone else's finish. That gap felt personal. It wasn't. It was timing. You were also taught to listen outward more than inward, to trust external opinions over internal signals. So when your instincts spoke, you questioned them. You asked for permission instead of direction. Over time, your inner voice got quieter. Not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't practiced. Underestimation isn't humility. It's a miscalibration. You learn to lower expectations to avoid disappointment. But lowered expectations also lower effort, and lowered effort limits growth. This conditioning didn't happen overnight. And it won't disappear overnight, but awareness breaks the pattern. Once you see it, you can challenge it. Once you challenge it, you weaken it. You don't need to become someone new. You need to stop agreeing with limits that were never yours. The moment you question the conditioning, you begin to reclaim your strength. The strength you use every day without noticing. You use strength constantly, not the dramatic kind, the invisible kind, the kind that doesn't get praised, the kind that doesn't get noticed. You wake up and step into responsibility. Even when you don't feel ready, even when motivation is low. That's a strength. You manage pressure, deadlines, expectations. You make decisions with incomplete information. You solve problems on the fly. You adapt when plans fall apart. That's a strength. You regulate emotions more than you realize. You pause instead of reacting. You stay composed in tense moments. You choose restraint over impulse. That takes effort. And effort is strength in action. You carry mental weight every day. Unfinished tasks, future concerns, other people's needs. You don't drop it. You adjust. That adjustment requires capacity. You also show up for others. You listen. You support. You follow through, even when you're tired, even when it's inconvenient. That's not automatic. That's discipline. You navigate uncertainty regularly. You make choices without guarantees. You take steps without full clarity. You trust yourself more than you think. That trust is subtle. It doesn't feel heroic, but it's real. You also recover more than you acknowledge. You reset after setbacks. You regain focus after distractions. You stabilize after stress. Recovery is strength. It's the ability to return to the center. You learn from experience. You adjust behavior. You refine judgment. You improve responses. Learning requires openness. Openness requires confidence. You handle complexity daily. Multiple roles, conflicting priorities, competing demands. You switch contexts. You recalibrate. That cognitive flexibility, it is a form of power. You don't see it because it's become normal. But normal doesn't mean small. It means practiced. Strength grows through repetition. And you've been repeating for years. You've built endurance without labeling it. You've developed resilience without celebrating it. That doesn't reduce its value. It proves its depth. The strength you're searching for, it is already active. It's not waiting to appear. It's already carrying you. Once you notice it, you stop doubting its existence. And once you stop doubting, you start using it intentionally. That's when everything shifts. Accessing strength in real life. Strength is a choice before it's a feeling. People wait to feel strong. That's backwards. Strength comes after action. Confidence follows commitment. Clarity follows movement. You don't get stronger by waiting. You get stronger by doing, one choice at a time. You don't wake up fearless. You decide to move anyway. You don't wait for certainty. You act with doubt in your pocket. Feelings are unstable. They spike. They crash. They lie. Choice is steady. Choice is deliberate. Choice creates direction. You choose to get up early. You choose the harder option. You choose to finish what you started, not because it feels good, because it builds you. Strength in real life is practical. It looks like going to work when you're tired. It looks like training when no one is watching. It looks like listening instead of reacting. It's paying the bill, having the hard talk, setting the boundary. Strength is restraint. Strength is focus. Strength is follow through. It's staying calm when you could explode. It's staying honest when you could hide. It's staying disciplined when you could drift. No spotlight, no soundtrack. Just standards. You create rules for yourself, then you live by them. You say you'll train, you train. You say you'll save, you save. You say you'll grow, you study, you practice, you adjust. This is how identity forms. Action leads proof. Proof reshapes self-image. Self-image drives behavior. Now, strength isn't something you chase. It's something you access because you've built it. Bad day? Still show up. Low energy? Do the minimum standard, not zero. Doubt creeping in? Shrink the task. Complete the step. Regain momentum. Real strength adapts. It doesn't collapse, it bends. It recalibrates, it continues. You stop asking, do I feel ready? You ask, what's required? Then you execute. You learn to separate emotion from execution. You learn to move without drama. You learn to finish. Strength is found in repetition, in structure, in ownership. No blaming, no waiting. No outsourcing responsibility. You take the hit, you take the lesson, you take the next step. That's access, not hype. Not intensity, control of attention, control of effort, control of response. Anyone can be strong when conditions are perfect. Accessing strength means performing when they aren't, when you're overlooked, when you're underestimated, when you're uncomfortable. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your knees. Prepare daily, eat with intention, train with purpose, speak with precision. Rest with discipline. Stack days, not dramatic days. Effective days. Over time, something shifts. Pressure feels lighter. Obstacles look smaller. Your pace steadies. You trust your capacity because you've tested it again and again and again. Strength is not a mood. It's a system. A pattern of choices aligned with who you want to become. Access it by acting. Access it by committing. Access it by refusing to negotiate with your lower self. No announcement required. Just a decision. Then execution. One real-world choice at a time. One daily act of courage. You don't need a massive change overnight. You need one daily act of courage. One thing that stretches you. One thing that challenges comfort. That's how strength compounds. Small actions, repeated consistently. That's how identities are rebuilt. Courage isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's controlled. It's choosing growth over ease. Send the message. Make the call. Submit the application. Speak up in the room. Ask the hard question. Tell the truth, not reckless, intentional, measured. Courage lives in the gap between fear and action. You feel resistance. You move anyway. You feel doubt. You step forward anyway. That single act shifts something. It chips away at the old story, the one that says you can't, the one that says stay small, the one that says wait. Every brave decision rewrites that script. You prove to yourself that discomfort won't break you. You prove that anxiety can be carried. You prove that action reduces fear. Momentum begins there, not in motivation, in motion. One uncomfortable rep at the gym, one honest boundary set, one extra hour invested in your craft. It doesn't look impressive. It looks ordinary. That's the power. Courage scales through repetition. You build tolerance for pressure. You build familiarity with uncertainty. You build stability under stress. The nervous system adapts. The mind sharpens. Your standards rise. Soon, what once felt terrifying feels manageable. What felt impossible feels technical. You stop overthinking. You start executing. One act per day sounds small. It isn't. Compounded over weeks, it reshapes behavior. Over months, it reshapes identity. Over the years, it reshapes destiny. You become the person who does hard things. Not occasionally, regularly. Courage becomes part of your routine. Like brushing your teeth, like showing up for work, non-negotiable. Some days, the act is bold. Some days, it's subtle. Getting out of bed when you want to hide. Apologizing when your ego resists. Saying no when approval tempts you. Each act strengthens self-trust. Self-trust builds confidence. Confidence stabilizes performance. You no longer rely on hype. You rely on proof, daily proof, collected quietly, stacked deliberately. There will be days you hesitate. Good, that's the edge. Lean into it. Growth hides there. Ask yourself each morning, what would courage look like today? Then do that. Not everything, just that. One move, one stretch, one decision aligned with the person you intend to become. You don't need a new life by tomorrow. You need one brave action before bed. Then repeat. Simple, demanding, transformative. One daily act of courage. That's how strength compounds. That's how fear loses authority. That's how identities are rebuilt from the inside out. One choice at a time. The moment most people quit. Most people don't quit at the end. They quit in the middle. Not when things are impossible, but when they're uncomfortable. There's a moment that comes after excitement fades and before the results appear. That's the danger zone. Energy drops. Progress feels slow. Doubt gets louder. This is where most people stop, not because they can't continue, but because they misread the signal. They assume discomfort means failure. It doesn't. It means you're transitioning. The early phase is driven by novelty. Everything feels fresh. Motivation is high. Then novelty disappears. What's left is effort. And effort doesn't feel exciting. It feels ordinary, repetitive, uncertain. That's where commitment is tested. Most people expect clarity before continuing. They want proof that the struggle is worth it. But proof usually comes after persistence, not before. This creates a gap between expectation and reality. In that gap, people start negotiating. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I chose wrong. Maybe I should stop. Those thoughts feel rational. They're not. They're fatigue speaking. Fatigue distorts judgment. It narrows the perspective. It exaggerates effort. It minimizes progress. You start focusing on how far you still have to go instead of how far you've already come. That's when quitting feels logical. Another reason people quit is they expect momentum to be constant. It isn't. Progress moves in waves. Push, pause, push again. When momentum slows, people panic. They assume something is wrong. But plateaus are part of progress. They allow consolidation. They build stability. Without them, growth collapses. Most people quit right before adaptation kicks in, right before skills sharpen, right before capacity expands. The body and mind are adjusting. That adjustment feels uncomfortable. So people stop, not realizing they were closer than they thought. Quitting often looks like self-respect. I'm listening to myself. I'm being realistic. But there's a difference between wisdom and avoidance. Wisdom evaluates direction. Avoidance escapes discomfort. Knowing which one is speaking changes outcomes. The moment most people quit, it is not a failure point. It's a decision point. One path leads back to familiarity. The other leads forward into capability. Most people choose comfort, not because they're weak, because they're unaware. Awareness changes that. Once you recognize the moment, you can move through it. And the people who do discover something powerful, they weren't stuck. They were strengthening. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, my friends.